All right, we're just going to take a few, maybe 1 or 2 minutes here as people start rolling in and getting comfortable, getting ready for this great, amazing book that we're going to read today. Give it another maybe 20, 30.
Good morning.
Yeah, it looks like people are rolling in. We're going to get a few more in here before we get started. All right, I think we'll get going. Hello, everyone, and welcome to P&P Live. My name is Heidi, and I'm the Community Outreach Coordinator at Politics and Prose. Thank you for joining us and tuning into this virtual format where we continue to bring authors and new books to you. I have the pleasure of hosting our event this morning, and I'm delighted to welcome our guest, Lucy Ruth Cummins. Before we get started, just a few housekeeping items. Closed captions are enabled for this event. If you would like to have closed captions on, click the live transcript and select show subtitle below. You can click the link that we will drop into the chat box to get your own copy of Vampenguin, which is amazing. If you have questions for our guests, you can click the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen and add one there. If you're joining us from school, please add your first name, your grade, and your school name to your question so we can give you a shout out. And just a quick reminder that the chat box has been disabled. Please only use the Q&A section for questions for our author. At the end of the presentation, our guest will have time to answer some of your questions. You can also upvote the questions you like and you want most answered. Now on to the event you're waiting for. Lucy Ruth Cummins is an author, an illustrator, and an art director of children's books. Her debut picture book, A Hungry Lion or a Dwindling Assortment of Animals, was a finalist for the Governor General's Award, an Irma Black Honor Book, and an ALA Notable Book. She is also the author-illustrator of Stumpkin and an illustrator of one of my favorite turtle books, Truman. And she lives with her family in Brooklyn, New York. And I'm going to turn everything over to her and come back a little bit later. Enjoy.
Good morning, everyone. Hi, I'm Lucy Ruth Cummins, and I am at all those things. I'm an author, an illustrator, and an art director of children's books. And so, first I'm gonna, let's see, I'm gonna get my screen ready here so I can talk to you guys. Here we go, that's the problem. And so what I do, stories either that I've written myself, which is true for Vampenguin and Stumpkin, or I illustrate the pictures for books that other people have written, which is true of Truman, which is written by Jean Reedy. And both jobs are really interesting for me because one, I'm really planning the whole story. And on the other side, I'm just taking the words and trying to make pictures that match up to what the words are that have been written. And I really like doing both. And then my third job as an art director means that I work with authors and illustrators to make their picture books. So in all of those different jobs, I get to do a little bit of storytelling, which is my favorite thing. But my most favorite thing is to paint and draw. And so when I get an opportunity to do a painting or drawing for a picture book, it's like the happiest thing for me and the most fun thing. And I have been a person who loved to draw since I was a little kid. I always used to draw giraffes when I was very tiny. And then I started drawing dogs all the time. And then I started drawing Mario and Yoshi and things like that. And then as I went on in my life, I ended up studying at art school how to design picture books and design things with typography and fonts and things like that. And also I studied illustration. So that's my background. I'm going to read to you from Vampenguin, and then I'm going to show you a little bit about how I came up with the idea for the characters. So I have behind me 3 of my books, and Vampenguin is the newest book that I have that I'm here to share with you today. As you can see from this cover, I think there's somebody in this group who doesn't belong. And I think it's this little guy, and he is telling us he has a secret he wants us to keep. So I'll read you this story, and then I'll talk to you a little bit about the characters in the story too. So Vampenguin, written and illustrated by Lucy Ruth Cummins, and that's me. And so I really like black and white, as you can tell from my dress and from my end papers. Okay, Vampenguin. We got sunrise at the zoo. It's the break of day. On Saturday, the Dracula family woke up extra early so they could beat the weekend crowds to the zoo. I got the baby, the daddy, the mom, And the little guy, I think he's probably first grade. And they're all having their breakfast. It looks like it's 7 in the morning, getting ready to go to the zoo. After a short wait in line, they made their way through the turnstiles. Does this look like a short wait in line or an incredibly long wait in line? I don't know. It looks like it could get pretty boring. Their first stop was always the penguin house. So they came through the gates here and they go directly to the little penguin house. We have the whole view of the whole zoo, all the different enclosures. We have so many zoos in New York City that you could go to a different one every weekend. Feels like all year long and see all the different animals. So when I was making this picture of the zoo, I thought about the Prospect Park Zoo, which is in my neighborhood. And so they go straight into the penguin house. The room was chilly, dark, and full of visitors. So this is in the penguin room. Look what's happening here. And look what's happening here. See a little fish dropping out of the bucket. There were Adelie penguins, African penguins, chin straps, flashy southern rock hoppers, and a handful of emperor penguins. Looks like somebody's getting to know someone else here. After they'd seen everything there was to see, they were ready for something different. So then look what's happening here. What's happening over here? Somebody's gone through the door. And if we follow this little path, we can see this penguin is making his way to the stroller and nobody is noticing. Back in the penguin enclosure, it was time for breakfast. So he's getting all the fishes out for the penguins. And he says, "Welcome, it's time for breakfast." There was almost enough to go around. Look how many fish he ate, and look how he ate them. Outdoors, the Draculas first saw the tiger. Did they? A little tail. Then the elephants. I see a trunk and a tail. Then the monkeys. I see 3 tails. And finally, the lion. Have any of you ever been behind a big crowd where you were just the smallest and you couldn't see what everyone was seeing? I am not very tall, and this happens to me all the time. At the bear exhibit, the Draculas argued back and forth about if it was a grizzly bear or a brown bear. The only thing they could agree on was that it was majestic. Look what the little penguin's doing. This guy with the cart says, "1, please." There was a lot to take in. Oh boy, that's a lot of snow cones. After they had had their fill, the Draculas made their way to the aviary. I want to show you folks something. Look at what the bear is doing back here. He's pointing to the penguin. He's trying to let them know, right? That's not your baby. But they don't notice. And so when it gets time to have them leave, what can he do? So after they had their fill, the Draculas made their way to the aviary. Aviary is the big house with birds. It's usually a little bit too hot. They flew right through it. Look at these birds. They are losing it. They really want this family to know what's going on. But what does he say? Shh, because he's having an adventure. Back outside, the entire Dracula family was absolutely delighted by the sea lion behavior demonstration. Do they look delighted? I'm not so sure. And again, trying to be helpful. Folks, that's not your guy. No luck. And back at the penguin house, first, one penguin made a splash. This guy came bursting out in this big splash of water. And another one made an even bigger splash. Look, he's showing them how we can wear our towels, right? To dry off. Penguins had never even thought of that. That's such a great idea if you want to dry off, right? He looks pretty proud. On the opposite side of the zoo, the Draculas ran into some old friends. I don't know that he seems that happy about this. When you folks go to the zoo, do you go into the creepy crawly room with the bats and the snakes and the bugs and the cockroaches and things like that? I can go in there, but I'm kind of like the penguin where I cover my eyes a little bit. At the penguin exhibit, some respectful children came to quietly observe the penguins. Do you think making faces is a nice way of making friends? Well, look at that. When you see these fangs, they get scared. And for some reason, they didn't hang around. It was getting late, and the last stop for the Draculas was the polar bear exhibit. They knew they had to get moving if they wanted to beat the evening rush home. And he's going, tap, tap, tap. You're about to take the wrong baby. And again, our little penguin friend is going, shh. And look how nicely dressed they are for this cold, cold room, huh? I like Mom's hat a lot. At the same time, across the zoo in another cold room, the penguin exhibit was suddenly proving to be a treat for all the senses. Phew. Do you think the penguins know how to change a diaper? I'm gonna guess not. I don't think they've ever done it. On their way to the exit, the Dracula family happily posed for a souvenir picture. Like they're trying to rush out. This guy stops him so she can take this picture. But even our pigeon friends say, oh, you're about to make a big mistake. But look, this penguin is looking up here. And who does he see through the window of the penguin house? Oh, it's our last chance. And Junior insisted they stop for a balloon in his favorite color. This is one of my favorite colors too, just black. But look, huh? They're changing places again, just in time. And off they went. They're driving home, but look at the souvenir that the little guy has. He's got his own fish. Would you want to have just a fish from a bucket in your car on a long ride? I don't think so. The Draculas would never forget their visit to the zoo. This huge traffic jam. And neither would the penguins. What did he teach them? He taught them how nice it is to have a little towel. And even when you can wrap your hair up in a little towel. This is my son's favorite penguin in the whole book. The end. And this is their little souvenir picture. And what will they learn when they see this picture about what happened on their whole day? They're going to find out the secret, right? So that is my book, Vampenguin. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about how I came up with this idea, because ideas are really funny things. Sometimes if I sit around and I think, I'd like to write a picture book, or I'd like to draw a picture book, I'd like an idea. And the more I want an idea, the harder it is to get one. And then other times, I'm just sitting there and I'm drawing pictures, or I'm thinking about something else, or I'm looking out my window, and the idea just hits. And every time I've had an idea I really liked for a picture book, it's been like that. It hasn't been me sitting there going, it's idea time. It's been me just living my life and things coming to me. So the way that I came up with the idea for Vampenguin was very particular. I was in a meeting. I work at an office during the day working on other people's books. And I was in a meeting, And I sat there and I drew a circle on my paper. I was listening as best I could, but I was also doing a little bit of doodling, because if you're a person who likes to draw, there's never a time when you don't want to be drawing. So I drew a little circle and I drew some little eyes, a little nose, and then I drew hair like this, which is the hair I think that vampires tend to have, which is called a widow's peak, actually. So once I'd drawn that, and I was just looking at this little picture of this little kind of a baby guy, baby vampire, I thought that's kind of interesting, because if I do the same thing, well, let's say I draw a shape that looks just basically a thumb, a big U upside down, and I put that same hair, it's called hair, but it's feathers, right? And I put two eyes, then suddenly I realized something, that these two together look very alike. So I had two characters where if I put, maybe if you have a little brother or sister, maybe they have a binky or a pacifier or a passy. If I put a little pacifier in the mouth of this Dracula, then I end up with something that looks very similar. And so a funny thing happened. Once I finished those drawings, I thought to myself, there's a whole story there, because if these two can take each other's place, what could they get up to? And so once I had that idea of those characters, I realized I have to get them together. So how do I get a Dracula and a penguin together? And the best way to do that is to have this guy go to the zoo. And so then I have to tell you, sometimes when you're writing a story, it just feels like magic. It just unfolded for me, everything that would happen in a whole day at the zoo. Because I go to the zoo so often, I know you see these animals, you get these snacks, you go through this path, you wait in these ticket lines. And then I could tell this whole story where they would switch places. And that is just the most fun way to come up with a story idea. So that's how I came up with these characters. And I gotta tell you, they're really simple to draw too. That's the other fun thing about them. It's just basically, if you want to draw a vampire, all you need is a circle, a triangle, two dots. I like to make a little round nose. There you got a vampire. And another set of triangles makes a nice little cape, right? And sometimes you want to put a little tie collar here. Pretty straightforward. And a penguin is even easier, because a penguin just has a V for a mouth facing one way, two little dots for eyes, triangle hair, and triangle fins. So you couldn't come up with two easier to draw characters, I don't think. So that's how I came to make this story. And I would love to answer questions if you folks have any questions for me about how I make books. But that's how I made this one.
Amazing, Lucy Ruth. Thank you so much. There are so many fun details in your book. I've read it myself probably 3 times, but just hearing you read it, I think all of us that are watching today, it's really special for us because you got to point out all of the really cool things that you included in the book yourself. Yeah, that was awesome.
One thing I'll tell you, that's here's one more secret from this book. And the most fun thing about being a picture book artist is you can put people you love in your books. So on this page, that's my son, Nate, first grader, and that's my husband giving him a piggyback ride. And it was very funny because when I was drawing the picture, my son came over and said, "Am I in the book?"
Does he always want to be in your books?
You know what? He's always surprised, and I always have to say, "It's my choice. I like you a lot. I will keep."
Exactly. The other thing you mentioned, I think is so important for kids that are watching, is just the importance of doodling. You know, if you are an artist or you want to be an artist, it is that all of the things that when you doodle that come out, like you said, it's the magic of drawing. It's like something special will come out. So, you know, don't be afraid to doodle.
Yeah, it's really funny because anytime I say to myself, I'm going to do the thing, nothing flows. Sometimes it really needs to get into a really loose and relaxed place. And I find that with me for storytelling, doodling is the thing that unlocks everything. And sometimes what I like to talk about is the idea that sometimes when you see a picture, then you just try to figure out what happened before and after the picture you're looking at. And that way of storytelling opens up even more.
Yes.
So a page full of doodles can be a whole page full of ideas if you're just letting your creativity flow like that.
Yeah, awesome advice. So as we're talking, I'm seeing that there are a lot of questions starting to roll in. So I want to be able to get to everybody's questions. So we're going to start off with a question from Katie. And she asks, how long did it take you to write and draw this book?
Okay, so for Vampenguin, I drew the little picture on my paper, and then I wrote the idea down on my phone, which is
Hmm.
a person who, before the pandemic, I used to ride the train back and forth to work, and so I would do a little bit of writing on my phone. So I plotted out the pictures, which means to organize the ideas in
Hmm.
words, and then I drew thumbnails. So thumbnails are really rough, kind of crummy drawings, just to show you what would happen on each page. And so once I had those, I got tighter and tighter, which means neater and neater versions of those drawings until I had a book that was just pictures. And that's how I always work. If it's, I love to write, but I think better with pictures. And so for me, the process of coming up with all the drawings was maybe a month. And then the process of writing the story over top of the drawings, which is really how I do it. I sit down and I type onto my drawings, was another 2 months, which is the harder part. And then the final artwork, the paintings that I do here, probably took me about 2 months more. Because once I've done these drawings really come directly from those sketches. So once I've got it really kind of tight like that, then I'm really just doing paintings to back up the drawings.
Yeah. Yeah, but so it's a process, right? It's all those different pieces that have to come together, especially the language, which the language in your book is so much fun. It's as much fun as the drawings.
I have to say there are 5 different versions of how this could read. And I kept on not figuring out how I wanted to tell the story. And then I realized that it was much more fun for the narration in this book, which is the storytelling over top of it, to kind of ignore the situation, because I think it's so much more fun to catch on to something than to have someone tell you what's happening.
Exactly. Yeah. Awesome. Okay, let's get on to some more questions here. So the next question is from Dominique McKee, and she says, this story is really funny. Why are they the only vampire family in the book?
You know what's so funny? It like a choice I had to make at a certain point, Dominique, was does the zoo have more like Frankenstein families or like Wolfman families or things like that? Because obviously it's kind of an old-fashioned monster idea. And then I just found it funnier if they were just people. And so my idea with the way that this vampire family works is they're just people, and this is kind of what their background is. It's like we all celebrate different holidays and have different traditions. These people happen to be Draculas, but I never wanted the world to get too confusing with how many monsters were there. I just needed to make sure that these two looked alike. So it's really kind of like try to make the story as easy as possible, but also I find it funny in its own way that like they're named the Draculas.
Right.
Which means they're the only Draculas.
Right.
That's where I was coming from.
Got it. Okay, let's see. The next question is from Winnie in 2nd grade at Lafayette. She wants to know, what is your favorite thing to draw?
My favorite thing to draw is animals. And when I started, animals in general, dogs mostly, I've always been a person who loved dogs. I like to go to dog shows. I like to stop people on the street and tell them what breed of dog they have, even though they already know, because I'm very good at dog breeds. So I've always liked to draw animals. And it was very funny because when I started making picture books, the first one I did was a hungry lion, which is all animals. And then as I came up with more ideas for stories, I thought, this story needs to have people in it, but I don't really like drawing people. And I kept on resisting the idea, or like trying to stay away from the idea of drawing people. And then I found that people can be just as funny, but people and animals, my favorite way to make a book.
Yeah. Awesome. Let's see. The next question is from Caroline at Merch, 1st grade. And she asks, what is your favorite part of the story?
Caroline, my favorite part of the story, I think the drawing that makes me laugh the most, or like the one that I find the silliest, is the one where this one where they're in the place with the spider. It's because I like the idea that even a penguin doesn't like a spider. And my husband, if there's a spider in our house, I have to catch it. Like, he's not a spider guy. He doesn't want to interact with them. And so in my life, I have to be the person who's brave about spiders, even though I don't really like them either.
Mhm.
So for me, this is always kind of a funny dynamic because I always pretend to not care, but I don't like them. This is how I feel inside, but this is how I feel when I find a spider in my house. I have to approach it, catch it, and release it because I'm also not a bug squasher. So
Same.
that drawing is my favorite drawing in the whole book.
Awesome. Okay, let's see. The next question is from Rowan, who is a second grader at Lafayette. And Rowan wants to know, why did you use so many bright colors in the book?
So a funny thing about color is when you're choosing to make a book, you could choose to use every color, of course, or you could choose to use a few colors. And I always found that books and art looks prettier when you choose just a few.
Mhm.
So when I start to tell a story, what I try to do is I try to work with the smallest number of colors that will give me enough difference in what I'm looking at. And then I add them as I need them. And so for this book, this color to me is the color of a penguin house, this teal color. It's just how I feel about penguins. And then black and white, obviously, for Draculas and penguins is very important. And then I have to tell you, I have rules about how I use color in my head, but one thing I can't escape is that I love yellow.
Hmm.
Anytime I can put yellow in something, I put yellow. But basically, the way that I choose my colors is least colors as possible and then add as I need. And so that's why this book ends up looking very blue, very pink, and very yellow.
Well, to add on to that, Daisy W wants to know why you like black so much.
I like black because I like how strong it is,
Hmm.
how it outlines things really nicely.
Mhm.
And so I just always really like to draw with black. And also when I went to art school for college, we only wore black. And so there were 4 years of my life where we didn't wear color.
Mhm.
And I got really interested. And the nice thing about having a lot of black is it matches everything. um, but mainly the thing I like is that when I draw with this line, which is this kind of charcoaly line, it feels so rich to me. So I like black for that reason too.
Great. The next question is from Amelia, who is a second grader at Lafayette. She wants to know, how do you know what details to add to your pictures?
So it's kind of the same way that I do the color, which is I add details only as much as I need them to keep telling the story.
Mm.
So in terms of what details that solve problems in this story,
Mhm.
a thing I had to figure out early on was how to get the Dracula, the little guy, into this room, right? Because there's a door closed, and when we know that there's security and things like that, if we were in a penguin enclosure, we wouldn't naturally be able to open that door, right? Only this person with the keys would be able to do that. And so in terms of when I add details, I add details when they help me tell the story. So if this fish doesn't fall on this page, then this fish doesn't hold this door on this page.
Oh, yeah.
And then it doesn't allow for this transition to happen where this guy can pass through here.
Yes.
So for me, the storytelling comes in, what the characters are doing, and then everything I need to do to just make the story happen.
Mhm.
And then nothing much extra, although
Mhm.
some people will notice from book to book that I really like to draw clothes a lot just because it's fun. I get to invent everybody's outfits. So you'll see a little more detail in my clothes sometimes, but every detail that I add that's not character based should help move the story along.
Mhm.
That's where I choose my details.
Awesome. Mom's outfits are my favorite. I love her black and white
Oh, she's
stripes.
so cool.
Yeah,
I think
she's
she
so
looks a little
cool.
like Joey Ramone sometimes, especially when
Yeah.
she's soaking wet.
Okay, great. So the next question is from Elias, who is a second grader at Lafayette. And Elias wants to know how you came up with the title. How were you inspired to come up with the title?
This is the strangest thing. This is again like that magic idea stuff. Same thing with Stumpkin, which is my book about a pumpkin that has no stem. Um, I can't remember how it happened, but I love words like this. This is when you folks will learn this later on when you're writing and reading. It's called a portmanteau, which is when you take two words and you put them together to make one new word. And for me, I love wordplay, which is like when one word sounds like another word and it's funny in the sentence that you're saying because you're saying a different meaning. And I like puns and things like that. And I love portmanteaus because I think they're fun to say. And so one day when I was drawing the story, late in drawing the story, all the pictures are done. I came up with the word Vampenguin and it just popped into my head and it was perfect. And the same thing happened with Stumpkin. I think I had one other bad idea for what that would be called. And then I came up with that. And then over the summer, last summer, I was driving the car and I thought the word Dalmatian. And that was the whole thing I thought.
Mm.
I just wrote a whole book about a Dalmatian, which is a Dalmatian from another planet. And that book will be out in a million years. But sometimes the word is the doodle.
Yeah.
And that was the doodle.
The inspiration. Oh, I love it. That's awesome. Okay, let's see. So talking about details, kids pay attention to so many details. Evelyn wants to know, what was the meeting you were in when you came up with this idea?
Oh, it's some people from that meeting will probably be watching this, and they will know that it's a very long meeting. And in the meeting, everyone at the book publisher comes and sits down, and they sit down with all the books that we're going to make for 3 or 4 years into the future, and we talk about every single book.
Mm.
Deep down, and someone says, the manuscript, the writing of the book, it's in. The paper has been ordered. Okay. The books are at the bindery. They're coming from China. Okay. The price should change. And we do that for about 3 hours every 2 weeks. And it's sometimes interesting because you have something interesting to say, but it's most of the time somebody else's book that they're working on. And so your mind can drift. But thankfully it drifted.
Exactly. And that's interesting to hear all those different details about how the books come together too.
Yeah, there's a lot of different people who make a book. And
Yeah,
there's a lot of different information that has to be done to make sure the book ends up at the store at the right time.
exactly. Okay, let's see. We have a question from Peyton, a second grader at Lafayette. And Peyton would like to know how old you were when you first started writing books.
So my first book I wrote when I was 30. And before then, I was very happy just to make other people's books. And so if I had an idea for a book, I would often just tell someone at my book publisher. I work at Simon & Schuster. And if I had a good enough idea, I would say, I've seen this person's artwork. I think it would be funny if they made a book that was this. So to that extent, maybe sometimes I would give an idea, but I never sat down and tried to write or craft a whole picture book on my own. And then when I came up with the idea for The Hungry Lion, it was because I had come up with an idea for someone else to do. My good friend Alexandra said to me when she saw this idea, couldn't you be the person who did this? Didn't you study illustration? Couldn't you? And that was the first time I wrote a book. So I think I was 30 or 31. So it was a long path, but for that first 10 years, I just made other people's books. But that's also was really good practice for learning how to do storytelling, was to work with other people and see how they think and how they strategize their stories. So it was all kind of a learning, like finishing up and then starting the process of becoming a writer.
Yeah. This kind of goes along with it a little bit, but I think this is an interesting question from Jackson, who's in the second grade at Lafayette. And Jackson wants to know, how did you feel when you were writing Vampenguin?
Sometimes I feel so proud, and sometimes I feel very frustrated. Like I was explaining, like I wrote this story 5 times, and I could never get the story to be as good as the pictures. And I kept on thinking, maybe that's okay. Maybe if it's not, maybe the pictures are good enough. Maybe if the words are not so great, maybe people won't. That was very frustrating. And I felt the limits of what I thought my brain or my talent could do. And I thought, maybe I don't have writing in me anymore. And then I got to the point where I really got it. And so I think the writing process is always either frustrating or filling you with pride and filling you with, say, if you have somebody in your life you love to make them happy or you love to impress them. For me, that's my son and my husband. I love sharing the work with them when I feel like it's right. And then I try to pretend I'm not excited to see how they feel. And then I wait for their reaction. But so it's always one of two things. It's never normal. It's always frustrated or proud.
No, that makes sense. I totally hear what you're saying. Exactly. The next question is from Anas, second grader at Lafayette. What inspires you the most to write a book?
For me, it's just when the idea hits. And it's such a nice thing to be able to make books. And I have the way that it works when you start making books, and now I've made a couple of books, is I have a great relationship with an editor. And the editor is the person who looks over your story, makes it even better than you could on your own, and sees potential, which is like how much it could do with a few changes. And I work with an art director, so My art director is Sonia. My editor is Justin. And they help me make this great, exciting thing. And they work with me together to do that. And so it's working together like that is what keeps it going. Get me back to the root of the question so I can come back around.
Inspiration. What was it?
So I'm inspired by the fact that I have people who are interested in my storytelling. And then I have interest now that I have my own child. I have a 6-year-old, a first grader, and I have a baby coming. I love the idea of being able to make a book I think they would like. And so between the two things, having this fun relationship working together with these people who help me make books, and then children, friends of my son and things like that, my nieces and nephews, that inspires me a lot.
Nice. Okay, we've got some process questions next. So Ian at Merch, who's a first grader, wants to know, when you made the penguins, did you use the paper or did you color the penguin in white?
So it's just the paper. So whenever you see a picture, a kind of interesting thing, and this is from being a person who works at a book publisher, is white is always paper. So we're always starting from paper color. Mm-hmm. And then anything else is added. It's another layer. And so the way that they lay down ink is we have 4 different colors of ink. They lay down at separate times, but anything that you don't want color in, you just don't draw in. So all these areas in my drawings, when I send the art to the publisher, they will be white. You never need to draw white. So yeah, it starts with just white paper. And then the funny thing about it is that you would never believe how many different white papers there are. Because then you can get really picky about how blue a white paper is or how yellow a white paper is. So there's a lot of different white, which is weird.
Here's another process question. Let's see, Annika from 2nd grade at Lafayette, what materials did you use to create the book?
Oh boy, this is when it gets kind of interesting. So when I start to draw, I use just a pencil on paper. Those are from when I talk about thumbnails, which are those really crummy little drawings I start with. That's what I do. But then I take those little crummy drawings and I blow them up on everybody's favorite thing, the iPad. I know that if my son's a first grader, I'm sure you all know what an iPad is. And so I draw on this, my drawings with this pencil, which works only onto this device, right? But it looks like I'm drawing on paper. But then I do something really nutty. Let me go grab something because it's very close by. Oh, you know what? I have something right here. After I have done my drawings, I print them out in black and white. And I trace them onto real paper. And then I make a painting on real paper. And I scan the painting and then I put my drawing over top. So when you see a drawing in my book, it's a combination of real paint and digital. That's what we call it when we draw on an iPad, digital line on top. So it's both things at once. But everybody in my house knows that you can't touch this iPad. This iPad has no games. It's work.
It's work, exactly. So we have a couple of questions here. I'm going to try to combine some. Some kids are really interested about why you chose the zoo. So what inspired you to make zoo scenes? That's from Florence at Lafayette. And then another person wants to know, how did you draw the animals from the zoo? And that's from Jack at Merch. So why the zoo?
So again, just like when I talk about the fish, what the fish does to move the story, the only way to get a Dracula and a penguin together is either, let's say, there's a couple ways. Maybe Dracula goes to the Arctic, but even that's too much of a journey. And so even getting there is like too long. So then the zoo is just, it just serves to be the place where you could meet. So I work backwards from what makes the story possible. So it has to be the zoo. And then animals are a funny thing where if I tell everybody who's listening right now to picture an elephant, we're all picturing a different elephant, but if we put it down on paper, we know what an elephant looks like, right? I rarely look at a picture of an animal, but it's mainly because I'm almost 40 years old and I have been drawing elephants for 38 years. And so I have an idea of what an elephant looks like. And what ends up happening eventually for you folks when you keep drawing is your elephant is your elephant. And so I have my way of doing it. But if I have to draw a particular animal that I want to describe here, I could, but all of these ones are kind of the ones that are in the animal crackers box. So they're all kind of already in my head what I would draw them if I were going to draw them.
Yeah, great. So I know we just have a few minutes left, so I'm going to try to combine a couple of questions. So Natasha, who's in second grade at Lafayette, and Rosie, who's also in second grade at Lafayette, they both want to know, why did you want to become an illustrator and an author?
I didn't.
Oh.
So when I went to college, I thought I went on to work just making graphic design, which graphic design is using typography, which is fonts and lettering, to tell a message. So I knew that I liked, this is a strange thing, and maybe some of you will feel this way later. I really like the way that letters look. And so that was the thing that made me interested. And so I always wanted to just work with letters.
Mhm.
But as I got through college, I went and worked at a book publisher, which was Simon and Schuster. And I learned the job of bookmaking. And then I really liked that. And then the neat thing was, when I told you about how I went from 20 to 30 without writing a book, I got to just pick the most talented illustrators and the most talented writers to work with. And I just got to help them kind of have their book.
Yeah.
And I loved just being there to do those tweaks. Like I say about my art director, Sonia, just to make it better. That was a fun enough job for me. And then it just happened to be that, again, my friend Alexandra saw this one idea that I had, which was for anyone. And she said, do it. And the weird thing is, once you start using your brain in a certain way, my brain starts working that way. So now I think of myself as a storyteller. And I don't let my worries about who would be better than me get in the way of me making my work. Because like I say about your elephant, right? Nobody can draw the elephant the way that you draw. So I'm not my favorite illustrator or my favorite storyteller, but I like the work I make, and it's different than everybody else's. And so sometimes you have to kind of get out of your own way a little bit.
Yeah.
But that's how it got started.
Yeah. Well, you're one of our favorite illustrators and authors, so thank you. And you're getting a lot of wonderful comments in the Q&A box here too. So yeah, absolutely. Let's see, maybe we can do two more questions. Katie wants to know, two of your books seem to be fall or Halloween themed. Is this your favorite time of year?
I got to tell you, it's a really, really, really big one for me because I really love Halloween costumes. So I always say to people that on November 1st, I start thinking about Halloween.
For next year.
All the way around the thing. Yeah, I love Halloween costumes. I love dressing up. I love the temperature. I grew up in upstate New York where the leaves change beautiful colors, and where we drink apple cider and eat cider donuts.
Yes.
And my favorite time of year, a little jacket, it's all you need. I do end up doing that. Although you can go to the zoo all year round, right? The Draculas do. We don't know that this is October for them. But yeah, I do like Halloween stories because I like Halloween. And if you looked at my bookshelf, you'd see a lot of Halloween books.
Yeah. Do you already have your Halloween costumes picked out for this year?
Well, you may have noticed there, I have a big belly in front of me. I have a baby coming just before Halloween. And boy, if you want to stop yourself from planning a Halloween costume, start trying to have a baby right before Halloween. My whole life is upside down. And all we do is joke about what the baby could be because he might be born right around Halloween, if you should be a little pumpkin or something like that. But last year my son was Miles Morales. I don't even think he started thinking about his Halloween costume because our whole family's really thinking about the baby right
now. Yeah. So we're just about out of time, but I want to read this last. It's not a question, it's a comment, and I think it's a really nice note to end on. And it's submitted by Dominique McKee, and she says, actually, I think she might be a teacher, and she says, Owen is so inspired, he wants to write his own book. So I think that is a really nice note to end on.
Should, because it's just as I said, only you can tell the stories that are in your head. They're different than everybody else's, and they're kind of perfect in their own way.
Yes.
And that's kind of a fun way to figure out what you want to do, is like, nobody can do it the way you do it, Owen. You will be the person who makes that story. Nobody could.
That's right.
I look forward to seeing what you make.
Absolutely. So I just want to remind everybody that Lucy Ruth's book is available. You can buy it through the chat box. You can also, we have it on our Halloween table at P&P. So please come by and look at you can pick it up in person and look at it and purchase your own copy there at the store, and maybe for a friend too. So Lucy Ruth, thank you so much for being here. We know you are very busy, and we're so excited you can come and share all those amazing details with us and inspiring kids to write their own books. So thank you so much.
Over how good the questions were. They
They
made
were
me think a
awesome.
lot about what I do, and they made me even prouder than I was when I started talking about the book. So thank you
Absolutely.
everybody for coming together for that. That was a really good way to spend some time.
Absolutely. And there were 16 questions that we didn't get to. So there's so many good questions. So sorry we didn't get to all of them, but when the
See each other for Dalmatian.
yes, exactly. So save more questions for that time, and we'll see you then.
Thank you so much. Bye, folks.
Go, bye everybody.